afternoon. Jill McCartney here with the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber for another edition of Northwest Now. And today we are with County Commissioner Brian Maughan, who is running for re-election. Brian, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Jill. I am actually working on the third term for Oklahoma County Commissioner District 2. I'm running for re-election. I've been serving since January of 2009. And I have grown up in South Oklahoma City, but I went to church for years in Bethany, and I've been very familiar with that part of the Northwest area of my district. And we have a tremendous relationship with the Northwest Chamber and with the other area municipalities that are in that region that you serve. And so I very much have enjoyed representing you and look forward to asking for another term.
And so over that time, what are some of the things that you consider your largest accomplishments?
I'm very proud of the SHINE program, which was the low offender alternative sentencing program. We had community service, but they weren't necessarily working alongside of the road projects and stuff that we were doing that previously was either labor or cost prohibitive. And so this allowed us to do a lot more while people could pay their debt back to society and not be locked up in the jail. So it reduced our jail population. It lowered our jail overhead, and it also allowed us to do things that we couldn't afford to do in the community. And I think it was transformational with a lot of the participants in the program who also felt like it really bolstered their confidence and their pride in what they were doing while they were paying repentance to society. I'm equally proud of getting the jail trust off the ground, and it just took over July 1. So now that we're seeing some citizen oversight, we're having a lot of transparency stuff come forward where it will allow, I think, best practices to be implemented, and there'll be a whole new level of improvements, I think, coming at the troubled jail that we've wrestled with for years.
Tell us a little bit about how the SHINE program differs from what's already there.
So what we'll actually do is show up at 7 in the morning with our road crew, and then they go out and assist. So they may clean out bar ditches or tin horns or things where we're actually out mowing. You know, you need people to go out and pick up the trash there so that it doesn't tear up our brush hogs and mowers and weed eaters. In addition to that, they pick up a lot of trash. We also work on removing graffiti and those parasite red cedar trees, which have been a huge culprit for the red wildfires. Red cedar trees have a sap that's very combustible. And then also there's been a huge issue with them sucking up the water tables. So we have drought conditions sometimes anyway. Double that, making it compounded worse because they're sucking up to maybe 80 gallons of water a day per tree, depending on the size, of course. And so we have had laws changed that allow people to do that. And then we're also working on just things that in general there have been needs for. We have had community service workers assist us with natural disasters. We've had them assist with areas of need with nonprofits that we've partnered with when we're having events, because most of those are held in a public area like parks or streets when we have a streetscape, you know, that's hosting an event. And we've done even in the Northwest area, we've helped you with your safari sweep that you graciously named for our late employee that was killed. It's almost hard to believe, but 8 years ago. And you guys honored her, and that was tremendous. But we were able to go out there and work with the members of your chamber and helping clean up that area. And we tried to build on that success, you know, not just areas that have been cleaned up one time and then forgotten about. Once we get them back to ground zero and they're kind of cleansed, we try to keep it that way so that it doesn't manifest back to the way it was.
How do you find the projects for that? Who are you working with and kind of getting those projects identified so that you can help out in that way?
Yeah, so SHINE turns 10 years old this year, and one of the things I used to enjoy doing the most was actually going out and finding the projects, because it was so tangible to find something and then fixing it, and then having just an automatic result to give you that satisfaction of really a sense of accomplishment. But now most of the projects find us before we're able to go out proactively and look for some. And we've been working off of a backlog. And then we recently lost funding last June so that we weren't able to do as many things. When I say June of 19, to do things as much as we used to do in the cities. So now with the funding that we have, we're working largely in the unincorporated areas where we can spend the highway fund cash for the supervisors, because my commitment to the court is that these individuals sentenced to us are never unattended. So we always have a county staffer that's overseeing them, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and behaving. And you know what, I'm proud to say we rarely have a problem. In fact, we've never had to call the police. These are truly low-level offenders, and we have done so much good for the community that I just think it's a win all the way around.
So you mentioned that you lost funding in 2019. So how was it funded? How is it funded now then?
We've graciously been given an annual grant from Oklahoma City because the law says if we work in any town over 5,000 in population, we have to have reimbursement because the highway fund is constitutionally restricted to just those areas of outside of a city limits or towns under 5,000 in population. And so when we got funding from the city, it doesn't mean we don't have jurisdictional authority and can't work there. We just can't use the highway fund for sourcing. So it's kind of complicated as far as that goes. But the city of Oklahoma City had graciously underwritten a program for several years to allow us to do it. They've had some need to scale back and rebudget. And then we had some issues to work out with how to go about refunding it. And I am confident going to be able to get that funding back and maybe other additional, more long-ranging permanent funding sources for the next year. I think we can relaunch and be back in all the city areas that we used to be in. And then also, I've been working with the Shine Foundation, and even though that's a nonprofit that's aside from government money, the Shine Foundation has 7 volunteer citizens that are on the board of directors, and they have been working on trying to raise $1 million endowment so that ultimately, once I do leave office, that this movie could be financed at least in part by an ongoing perpetual endowment so that we don't even have to use government funding.
I know that there are lots of challenges that the county commission takes on, and what do you see as the future challenges?
One of the main things that I'm going to work on is trying to help further stabilize the jail trust. It just took over on July 1st. We've been working on it for a long time. I called on it now about 3.5 years ago. And so I'm excited to see it finally come to fruition, but it needs a lot of assistance. We knew that that transition was going to be a big deal. It's the largest department. It's the largest line item on our overall budget of around $100 million for the county-wide. They account for around 40% of the budget. So we understand that the need of transparency was there. That's why I wanted to get citizen oversight and have an area for exchange where citizens not even on the trust could come before a body and have a voice. And that has been happening. It's been very high profile in how it's being played out in the news. And it's uncomfortable, I think, for all the parties. But the important thing is that it's the first time we've had a conversation. Prior to that, we just didn't. It was really, regardless of party, the sheriff's call, at least on the day-to-day operations. The budget board might have had an opportunity to threaten with budget restraints or to do something, but mostly once a budget was approved and given out, the sheriff could make that call, and then that was it. So I like the fact that it's an evolving thing and that we're probably right now in a state of kind of figuring a lot of that out. We knew there were going to be kinks that had to be ironed out, but we are taking on something that has never been done before in Oklahoma County, and really of any comparison, only been done in Tulsa County, and it was done in a couple of different ways, not exactly the way we've gone about doing it. So I hope that we've learned from some of their mistakes, and we're going to build on that and have a better success story. But they've only been in place for 90 days, and so I think that we need to give them a chance, and we'll see good things come from it.
I know in the news lately, decision to transfer some of the CARES funds, specifically to the jail. I guess the majority of the CARES funds that the county had purview over. And I think I heard it said that, well, the businesses and such in Oklahoma City didn't need it because they already had some. But I know there are also lots of other small businesses in, Bethany and Waracres and other places that hasn't had as much of that funding that Oklahoma City had. How did you all decide to put it all toward the jail and not help in some of these businesses that are really struggling right now?
Again, thank you for the opportunity to clarify this. It's been a complicated story. And with the news, there's only 30-second sound bites often that we get to work with. So that's what's so valuable about what you're doing here today and allowing me to explain to your members, some of these more complex situations. Number one, Tulsa DA and the Oklahoma County DA don't agree on how the money is to be spent as written by the federal act. So it only matters what our DA says in terms of what our ability is for risk of prosecution. So we want to be clear about that. Secondarily, it was also given to the city of Tulsa by way of the county only. In Oklahoma County, Oklahoma City was given money separate to direct to the mayor and council. And then we were given money separate to the Board of County Commissioners and the Budget Board here in Oklahoma County. So what that means, because you can't have double dipping with federal requirements, you got to be sure you handle all this money very, very carefully. Mm-hmm. So you can't have double dipping. What that means is anybody in Oklahoma City, any organization, any business or otherwise, can only apply for assistance through Oklahoma City. That includes as little down to their address of intent. Even if they're an organization or a business that services beyond the Oklahoma City limits, if they have a post office box or an actual physical brick and mortar building in Oklahoma City, that is what is considered to be their headquarters and the area where they need to apply from. So that left us with all the areas outside of Oklahoma City, which does include Bethany and War Acres and other areas that you service, of course, with your membership. However, with what we can give, it still must comply with what counties can do. Cities can give away money that counties can't. They can do ordinances. We can only speak and do things to what state statute specifically says we can do. And so if there wasn't a provision to do that, then we were handcuffed by our own state law. And in some cases, we were handcuffed by the narrow scope of the way it was written with the Federal Act, some of which I think wasn't even an intended consequence from the authors in Congress. And we've spoken with our own delegation of federal members here in Oklahoma, and even they were of hopes that maybe it could be more broadly applied. So what does it end up being for that Oklahoma County can do? It has to be an expense directly related to Oklahoma County. So originally in my first conversation with the district attorney, he was saying like maybe cleaning supplies, extra custodial staff, mask, cleansing supplies that we could maybe disseminate among employees to keep them safe in their interactions with the public. And that's about it. So we have found ways to spend more money than we originally thought we were going to be able to utilize out of this $47 million. But largely we were expected to return most of it back because the federal provision said it must be expended by December 30th, meaning out of our bank account. So we found a way to do rental assistance for residents outside of Oklahoma City, still in Oklahoma County, and we arbitrarily picked a number, not having a model to really know what to do, of $1.5 million. But the threshold that you must establish to qualify for that is so specific that it has turned out to be that very few people qualify for that. And so today, only about 83,000 of that 1.5 million is left. So a lot of the critics who said, why give so much to the jail when there's so many people in need? Well, one, they have to qualify for it. However heartbreaking it is that we see so many stories of need, they have to fit in all the parameters of the federal requirements. And then the state law goes as another label of things that they have to meet. And then what happens is the area of greatest need is, as it turns out, it appears mostly in Oklahoma City. And so Oklahoma City Council, which was given more money than the county, has been working on doing that. There's also been some state assistance where other towns like Bethany and War Acres can apply directly to the governor's office and work on getting assistance for their towns. But we're still able to doubly serve. But what happens is we're not the only rescue team out there. So when it came down to the ones that fell down through the funnel to us, it has turned out to be that 1.5 million for rental assistance was more than adequate. And again, just like the other, it has to be expended by December 30th. So the timeline is really what we're up against. What kind of projects can you really let and get completed and write the final check for by December 30th? When it came to the jail trust, they said, informally, there's been some complaints that it wasn't a vote and sent to us in the form of a resolution, but talking to the leadership and the jail administrator that works for the jail trust and the general counsel that works for the jail trust, I think all of us commissioners were involved in individual conversations. And it became clear that they said, you know, look, we can go with $200 million worth of projects and renovations or 20. It makes a big difference if you tell us in the range of a ballpark how much you're willing to offer us to even try to explore things we can fix. And so when we kind of made sure we had taken care of most of our priorities within the county government, and we saw that we were roughly going to have about 34 million, and keep in mind that leaves $2 full million left that are still in the bank that has been drawn from very, very little. I think there was something on there for a couple of $1,000s the other day. And so the bulk of that 2 million is still there intact in case we did have something come up. We didn't empty the whole bank, and we gave it to the jail. And the jail trust, just likewise, If they don't have a way to spend it by December 30th, will send us back whatever they haven't used either, and then we'll return that as we're supposed to the federal treasury. And so they may or may not be able to use that sum. We just said, hey, this is what we're not going to be able to probably find a utilized use for that is legal. And then if you can, and we can get some utilization out of it for the benefit of a county structure that poses a liability to the taxpayers and property owners in Oklahoma County, then hey, let's do that, because the COVID outbreak in the jail is a very real thing. And when Mayor Holt in Oklahoma City was bragging about there was only less than 200 cases one day in Oklahoma City, it just so happened we got a COVID count that day and over 150 of them were in the county jail.
Yeah.
While people stay in the jail for a little bit, they usually stay between like 12 and 36 hours. That's not very long, but it's long enough to contract COVID. Then they're going home to moms and dads and grandmas and children and grandchildren, and that becomes part of the super spread. So we know we are no different than most of the counties across the state, and we're seeing news reports across the country that we have a major problem. It's intrinsic with the design of a jail. It's to keep people kind of in close quarters contained. And so there's not a real social distancing design that also measures up with how a jail works. And including with the HVAC and the water, and now we believe that COVID is transferable through water. Then we have to watch about sewers getting backed up. Inmates love to do what they call sock bombs, which explodes and causes fecal matter to flow through. When I say that water can be transferable of COVID, it's usually in the form of the fecal matter that is in the water. I want to be clear. And so what happens is that is basically, we can be kind of somewhat crude here, gently saying that it is sewer sludge that is running through. And it's unavoidable for both staff and inmates to not be exposed to those contaminants unless we really do something to attempt to try to fix that. And then, of course, the HVAC, everybody understands how air droplets can be sucked through a return air vent and disseminated to other parts of the jail. So I talked to somebody today who's trying to do the new Carpenter Square Theater, and they're trying to make sure that there's free air and independent air coming in there. It's no different if you go in to watch a play. They need to make sure that that air is getting circulated out. If it's recirculated, it leaves the exposure risk possible. However diluted, it's still possible. And no one wants to contaminate anybody because you go to something that you either have to, like a jail, or that you elect to, like the theater. And those things are not cheap to fix, I might add. And so I don't even think that probably there is enough money, but because of that December 30th timeline, I don't think that there's even going to be an ability to use all of the money that we gave them. So I expect that part of that will most likely be returned. And I'm sorry that that's a long answer, but I wanted to give you the full.
I really thank you for that very thorough explanation. And
Relatively new thing.
sure.
We're being exposed as leaders in the community about different things that we need to safeguard the public against. And I think this is just a proactive measure. If it were about involving a tax increase, if this were about bankrupting essential services, I could understand why there might be a greater concern and outcry in the public. But we were given a one-time opportunity to fix this by Congress, and it was for matters strictly related to the COVID outbreak that were an unexpected incurred expense on the counties. And I think that it was the best stewardship of those dollars to do it, because any litigation that comes will be largely in the cases of federal lawsuits. And the way that's decided by law is to be against the property owners of that county. And those property tax increases have to be whatever it is to offset a payment of any federal judgment over a period of only 3 years. You know, when you as a chamber go out and lead an endeavor to maybe pass a school bond or a city bond in there, you guys may expand it over a period as long as protracted 20 years or something like that, which doesn't make the fiscal impact per household that much. But when some of these large judgments come down and federal law stipulates they must be paid off over a 3-year period, that is a noticeable uptick to people's property taxes. And I take that very serious.
I thank you for explaining that. And having toured the jail, I certainly know that there's a lot of fixing that needs to happen there. And, you know, the fact that whatever improvements are going to be made through this effort are not directly out of our tax dollars is a good thing, because there definitely isn't any shortage of needs there. So thanks for explaining that.
And any building's going to wear out, and it's a higher usage than most public buildings, so you can expect that that's going to happen. But I also remind everybody it's newer than most of the schools in Oklahoma County that we send our students to. And so we fix them. We don't just expect as a community that once they get a little wear and tear that we're going to graze them and then wipe out a new pad to erect a new building. We know those buildings take repairs, and a lot of those bonds that I just alluded to talk about capital upgrades to existing structures, not a complete new building. But the county jail hasn't really had any serious funding dedicated towards that. It's not because we didn't know those needs that you mentioned weren't there. They are fairly self-evident when you and others can go through on a community tour. I'm sure many of your chamber members have done that, but you have to have the upfront money to work with. And without the ability to pass a sales tax increase, which has routinely polled around 80 to 83% against, you have to work pragmatically and understand that there is no political will amongst the people to adopt a tax increase. So what are we going to do? We have to work with existing resources. And that is what we've done with this CARES.
Now, I know there's only 3 commissioners over the entire county, and your district is just sprawling. Kind of describe where that is for those that might not be familiar.
Sort of a horseshoe shape with on the west side, basically everything going up to Wilshire and underneath Lake Hefner, and then running down and catching all of South Oklahoma City. On the northwest side, it includes every square inch of Bethany and War Acres, and some of northwest Oklahoma City, all of South Oklahoma City, the part of Newalla that's in Oklahoma County, Hara, Choctaw, and Nakoma Park.
Do you think that redistricting, because of the census, is going to be modifying those boundaries, or what do you think will happen with that?
Preliminary estimates that I've received said that District 2 has grown. We have seen a tremendous growth, and some of the Wheatland area that I also represent, and the Newalla area that I said is in the southeast corner of the county. And so I expect that we will have to draw back the boundaries of District 2 somewhat, and we will reduce geographically in size somewhat.
So are you going to go with the west side or the east side?
Well, it probably depends on the offset for population. It just depends on where a lot of the growth is. Interestingly enough, if so much of the growth is down south, that means the stuff up towards the north end has to be what geographically gets shaved off. There's no real way to cut the southern border of the county off.
Tell me, how do you work with the other commissioners and the other county elected officials? What is kind of that dynamic, and how does that impact policy?
A lot of what we do day to day with treating our district, we're really autonomous. So it's just working with our team, and I've had a great team. I really appreciate my staff. The road crew is probably the best one I've had in the time I've been there. We've had some super hires. And so I think the public has been seeing a lot more progress. And then in terms with the dynamic with the elected officials, I think the budget board that we're serving with now has probably been the most conservative. And for chamber members, what does that mean to you, the taxpayers or community leaders? We have the largest reserve coming into a fiscal year that we have ever had in the time I've been there. And that's a rainy day fund. It was suggested at last night's debate that we had is, why don't you spend some more of that money? Well, we usually have unexpected expenses, and it has been in dire circumstances that we have had to figure out where we're going to carve that money from. It's the first time we've been, in my opinion, really in solvent shape to handle an unexpected situation like that. And I think a lot of that's because we've worked on reducing the health care for our employees, which has both been a benefit to their cost and then the employer cost from the county. And I think we have pioneered in ways that we have helped them have better health so that they're living longer, but also having less spike cost experiences for both them and us with the employer as a self-insured agency. And then I think that we are also working on making sure that the dollars we spend are being spent in ways that we don't have to go back and readdress those problems. And that hasn't always been the mindset. That sometimes means you have to spend more money up front in order to not have to come down and spend what would turn out to be a lot more money down the road.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there anything else you would add to our discussion that voters should take into consideration as they go to the polls?
I just hope that if anybody has a question, I know particularly with this CARES Act, as we just thank you for being so gracious and allowing me that long explanation to maybe clear up some air. But if they have further questions, don't hesitate to call me. I'm always available. My cell phone is 824-3120. You can call or text me. I'll try to get back with you as soon as possible if I don't actually answer at the moment. And I'm happy to discuss these things further. And I hope that you feel like I've always been accessible to you, and I'd like to continue to be. And I would really appreciate your vote.
Well, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.